Go into the world and tell every man that you meet, there is a man on the cross.
A Catholic Take. What you need to know right now. A bold synthesis of inspiration and information. Keeping you up to date on the news and issues from a courageous Catholic perspective.
A Catholic Take with Joe McLean starts now.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McLean. It is great to be on with you. Praise be to God. What does Saint Padre Pio, Shia LaBeouf, and aliens from another planet have in common? Well, not much, but nonetheless, we are going to talk about that. It's a trending story today. There's a whistleblower out. He's been saying the government has UFO technology and bodies from another planet in possession, has had for years. But he's never seen them. So interesting. So we're going to have a conversation around intelligent life from another planet, what Padre Pio would have said about aliens and what we believe as Catholics and what's the bottom line. All of that coming up at 15 past the hour. At 30 past the hour, Matt Gaspers, editor of Catholic Family News, is going to be on. You know, the SSPX built a huge church in Kansas. They consecrated it, a week ago, maybe a week before that? Well, the Archdiocese of Kansas has now commented on that. Matt Gaspers is going to be on at 30 past the hour to talk about that, the significance of it. All of that coming up on the show today. Hey, can I just say thank you for those who have left 5-star reviews of the podcast of A Catholic Take, especially on the iTunes store. That means the world to us. So thank you for being on the team today. 5-star reviews helps our show to gain some traction in their catalog, and therefore they show it to strangers, perfect strangers. It's a fantastic way to help evangelize by leaving a 5-star review on iTunes. So please consider that today for the podcast. All the links, the access to the podcast and everything else can be found on our website at thestationofthecross.com/ACT. Let's pray. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen. Remember, O most gracious Virgin Mary, that never was it known that anyone who fled to thy protection, implored thy help, or sought thine intercession was left unaided. Inspired by this confidence, I fly unto thee, O Virgin of Virgins, my mother. To thee do I come. Before thee I stand, sinful and sorrowful. O Mother of the Word incarnate, despise not my petitions, but in thy mercy hear and answer me. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost, and now your saint of the day.
Saint Philip the Deacon, pray for us. Philip was born in Caesarea, Palestine, most likely a Hellenized Jew. He was the second, after St. Stephen Protomartyr, of the 7 deacons named and ordained in chapter 6 of the Acts of the Apostles. For his skillful preaching, he is referred to in Acts chapter 21 as Philip the Evangelist. After the martyrdom of Stephen, Philip preached the gospel throughout Samaria. He converted many, including the magician known as Simon Magus, who after his baptism would then attempt to purchase episcopal powers from the apostles, thus forever giving his name to the sin of simony, the selling of ecclesiastical items or sacred things. After his work in Samaria, Philip was sent by an angel to preach in the region of Gaza, where he converted the Jewish Ethiopian eunuch who was chief treasurer of the Queen of the Ethiopians. This convert went on to bring the faith to his own country, according to church fathers. Philip eventually returned to his home in Caesarea, where he lived with his 4 daughters, all consecrated virgins who possessed the gift of prophecy. He died there, possibly around the year 58. St. Philip the Deacon, pray for us.
And now your headline news. Breitbart reports Chinese defense minister threatens to attack Taiwan without any hesitation. Chinese National Defense Minister Li Shangfu, making his debut on the international stage, told attendees at the Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore on Sunday that the communist nation's military would attack without any hesitation against any allies of Taiwan seeking to support the nation's independence from Beijing. The event is an annual platform for the world's most powerful military leaders to discuss the future of national defense. Li spent most of his address at the event promoting the Communist Party's global security initiative. The Sun reports entire family lost in D.C. area plane crash after F-16s tried contacting passed-out pilot. A Florida businessman and prominent MAGA donor has claimed ownership of the aircraft that flew over restricted airspace in Washington, D.C. on Sunday, saying his entire family was on board. Investigators have not found any survivors after the Cessna Citation plane crashed in Virginia after the pilot reportedly lost consciousness. John Rumpel told the Washington Post that his, quote, entire family, close quote, was on board, including a daughter, grandchild, and a nanny. The plane departed from Tennessee and was headed to Long Island, New York. However, instead of landing in New York, the plane then looped back toward Washington, D.C. Air National Guard F-16 jets were racing to catch the Cessna after it violated the airspace in D.C., and they were caused a sonic boom, which caused tremendous concern. The Cessna aircraft then crashed into the mountainous terrain in a sparsely populated area of southwest Virginia, according to the FAA. Let's keep the repose of their souls in our prayers. Epoch Times reports New York City mayor plans to house illegal immigrants in houses of worship and private homes. With Republican governors in southern border states sending illegal immigrants to northern sanctuary cities like New York, Adams has turned to the faith community, proposing a plan to utilize houses of worship as temporary shelters for asylum seekers as the city struggles to cope. Up to 50 houses of worship of faith-based spaces will provide overnight accommodation for up to 19 single adult men at each location. The normal activities of these spaces will continue during the day, while the city plans to establish 5 daytime centers for additional programming. Adams said he envisions the next step to include expanding beyond faith-based spaces to sheltering illegal immigrants in the spare rooms of private residences, utilizing spare rooms in households of everyday New Yorkers. And those are your headline news. The gospel today comes to us from Mark chapter 12, verses 13 through 17. Some Pharisees and Herodians were sent to Jesus to ensnare him in his speech. They came and said to him, "Teacher, we know that you are a truthful man, and that you are not concerned with anyone's opinion. You do not regard a person's status, but teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. Is it lawful to pay the census tax to Caesar or not? Should we pay or should we not pay?" Knowing their hypocrisy, he said to them, "Why are you testing me? Bring me a denarius to look at." They brought one to him, and he said to them, "Whose image and inscription is this?" They replied, "Caesar's." So Jesus said to them, "Repay to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and to God what belongs to God." They were utterly amazed at him. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Theophilus would say, "For their whole plot was one which had a precipice on both sides, so that if he said that it was lawful to give tribute to Caesar, they might provoke the people against him, as though he wished to reduce the nation itself to slavery. But if he said that it was not lawful, they might cause him as though he was stirring up the people against Caesar. But the fountain of wisdom escaped their snares." Close quote, Theophilus. You know, I love that about the Gospels. They try every time to find a way to ensnare him, to trap him. And every time the Lord, brilliantly escapes their traps. Haydock's Catholic Bible commentary goes on to say, although Christ clearly establishes here the strict obligation of paying to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, to the confusion of his very enemies, we shall still find them bringing forward against him the charge of disloyalty, as if he forbade tribute to be paid to Caesar. Luke 23:2. After the example of her divine model, the Catholic Church has uniformly taught with St. Paul the necessity of obeying the powers in being, and this not for fear for their wrath, but for conscience sake. Render to Caesar the money on which his image is stamped, but render yourselves cheerfully to God, for the light of thy countenance, O Lord, is stamped upon us, Psalm 4, and not the image of Caesar. as quoted by St. Jerome. With reason were they astonished at the wisdom of this answer, which eluded all their artifices, and taught them at the same time what they owed to their prince and what they owed to God. And whoever hopes for the favor of heaven must conscientiously observe this double duty to God and to the magistrate. The Theophilus would go on to say, they who ought to have believed wondered at such great wisdom because they had found no place for their craftiness. I like that. That's so good. They had found no place for their craftiness. Like little snakes in the grass, our Lord deals with them like the gardener in the garden should have back in Genesis chapter 2 and 3. So here's the bottom line. You are made in God's image and likeness. So you must render your life to God. But we are pilgrims on this earth, and we are members of our society, so we must become active members of society. We must vote, for instance, as a good example. We must serve our communities. Some serve in uniform. Some serve in other ways. But we must respect the government that has been put in place and trust God in all things. Does that mean we agree to what the government does each and every time? Of course not. Just look at our own government and their evil ways sometimes with promoting things like abortion or destroying marriage between a man and a woman, to give just a couple of examples. We, of course, can't support those things. But does that mean we reject our government? No. No, it does not. Give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar and give to God what belongs to God. Do we live our lives that way? That is the question for us today. So let us ponder that. Here's another question. Is there intelligent life out there? Are there aliens in a foreign planet? Do we have them in our possession, as our government seems to suggest? Well, we'll find out. That's coming up next. And what would St. Padre Pio say about all of this? And it's coming up next.
Hear what listeners are saying about the free iCatholic Radio mobile app.
Through the iCatholic Radio app, I have listened to the sermons and teachings several times. The effect has been a deeper understanding of my faith and Catholic tradition. This app has truly been a blessing in my life and has increased my faith.
Listen live or at your convenience to your favorite shows. Just search for iCatholic Radio in your app store today.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McLean. So good to be on with you. Praise be to God. Coming up at 30 past the hour, Matt Gaspers is going to be our guest. He's the editor over at Catholic Family News. And last week, he put out an article, exclusive Archdiocese of Kansas City comments on SSPX in light of recent Immaculata Church consecration. There's been a lot of conversation and debate about the SSPX. And so we thought we'd get him on today to talk about why that is significant, what the Archdiocese has said about that, and why that would be significant. Also, tell us about this church that was built out there. It seems like it's a massive, beautiful church. So we're going to get more on that with Matt Gaspers at 30 past the hour. Stick around and join us if you can. There are lots of stories in the news, of course, that are of great concern to me, and I'm sure they are to you. And here's a story I saw circulating the interwebs just yesterday, trending, as it were. Intelligence officials say U.S. has retrieved craft of non-human origin. It's like the X-Files, right? The old-fashioned UFO, the Roswell stories, aliens from another planet. Would this mean that there is life out there? Well, there is a whistleblower who has come forward. He is apparently testifying to Congress about what he knows and doesn't know about the government involvement in recovering unidentified flying objects, crafts, or they're calling them now UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomenon. Here's the first few paragraphs of this article out of the debrief. A former intelligence official turned whistleblower has given Congress and the intelligence community inspector general extensive classified information about deeply covert programs that he says possesses retrieved intact and partially intact craft of non-human origin. The information, he says, has been illegally withheld from Congress. He filed a complaint alleging that he suffered illegal retaliation for his confidential disclosures reported here for the first time. Other intelligence officials, both active and retired with knowledge of these programs through their work in various agencies, have independently provided similar corroborating information both on and off the record. The whistleblower, David Charles Grush, 36 years old, a decorated former combat officer in Afghanistan, is a veteran of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, that's a mouthful, and the National Reconnaissance Office. He served as the Reconnaissance Office's representative to the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force from 2019 to 2021. From late 21 to July 22, he was the NGA's co-lead for UAP analysis and its representative to the task force. Now, here is what he said in a recent interview with News Nation.
What conclusion did you come to at the end of your time on the UAP task force?
The UAP task force was refused access to a broad crash retrieval program.
When you say crash retrieval, what do you mean?
These are retrieving non-human origin technical vehicles, call it spacecraft if you will, non-human, exotic origin vehicles that have either landed or crashed.
We have spacecraft from another species.
We do, yeah.
How many?
Quite a number.
You're kidding.
No. I thought it was totally nuts, and I thought at first I was being deceived. It was a ruse. People started confiding in me. They approached me. I have plenty of current and former senior intelligence officers that came to me, many of which I knew almost my whole career, that confided in me. They were a part of a program. They named the program. I've never heard of it. And they told me, based on their oral testimony, and they provided me documents and other proof, that they're...
So there you go, folks. That case closed. Life out there. We can all just move on now, right? Here's the catch with this whistleblower. Now, I don't know this man. I can't assume that he is trying to deceive anybody in any way or lying to anybody in any way, but he does admit in this interview with News Nation, we're going to link to this, by the way, and everything we're going to link on our show notes at thestationofthecross.com/ACT. But he admits in this interview he has never, ever personally seen these aircraft. He has never, ever personally seen retrieved bodies of alien pilots. Never. He's never personally. He admits that in this interview. So he is simply passing on things that other people have said to him. Well, it's corroborated by various journalists and other intelligence agencies, all of which is simply sharing information shared by them, from other people. Now, he claims to have submitted evidence that would prove his case. He did not allow News Nation to see that evidence. He said it was classified and they weren't allowed to see it. So we have to just simply take upon the face value of his word that what he says is true. Because other people say so, so it must be true. So there you go. He could be telling the truth. He may not be telling the truth. Well, let's listen to what AARO, this is the organization that is doing the research from NASA on these unidentified aerial phenomena, what their conclusions were. This is what the guy who runs that group says.
I also emphasized to Congress that only a very small percentage of UAP reports display signatures that could reasonably be described as anomalous. The majority of unidentified objects reported to AARO and in our holdings demonstrate mundane characteristics of readily explainable sources. While a large number of cases in AARO's holdings remain technically unresolved, this is primarily due to a lack of data associated with those cases. Without sufficient data, we are unable to reach defendable conclusions that meet the high scientific standards we set for resolution.
So there you go, folks. The vast majority of all unidentified aerial phenomena that they've studied has really concluded to not much. In fact, I will again be linking to all of this stuff, and you can see more in-depth coverage in greater detail and context of all of their statements. But they go on to look at specific cases of videos that people have sent in, or videos that the U.S. military has captured through their equipment. And they make very clear distinctions that military equipment is not scientifically calibrated. It has a distinct military purpose, and therefore its calibration is different. And therefore, if they were trying to better understand certain aircraft, their phenomenon, how they move about the sky, you would use different equipment calibrated different ways. They make that point clear. They even show examples of like spheres moving over the ground. And if you ever sometime maybe you could Google Corridor Crew debunks UFO video. It's hilarious to see how VFX artists view these same videos and how they would say how they could recreate them very easily, or they could explain them away in sort of simple terms. It's almost hilarious, to be honest with you. That doesn't mean that there isn't a sort of unexplained aerial phenomenon happening. I'm not trying to make that point either. But my point is, there's more to the story than we are often told in the headline news. So, okay, well, what can we believe as Catholics? Alien life? Surely there must be alien life out there, Joe. I mean, have you no idea of the vastness of stars, space, planets, the universe? It's so expansive. It's endless. Surely we cannot be alone. And what have the saints said about it? What has the church said about this? Well, in fact, the church doesn't really have a teaching on alien life. If alien life exists out there, we, in fact, would have to come to the conclusion that God is the creator of it, because God's the creator of everything in the universe, to include all of its life forms. The next question might be, if we discovered life out there, well, is it intelligent? I mean, does it have a rational soul or not? Or is it more like an animal? These are questions that would all have to be discerned carefully. And then I would imagine the church would have to weigh in on those topics once they were discovered. But at the end of the day, I often treat alien stories, UFO stories, UAP stories the same way I treat Bigfoot stories. You're left with more mystery than you are with answers. It's just endless amounts of mystery, of just open loops and cliffhangers and plot twists with no real definitive conclusions. More of what they said and she said and he said. Does that mean we won't find a Bigfoot someday out there that we can bring to a press release and say, see, I told you, here's Harry and those are the Hendersons? Yeah, that would be pretty cool. That'd be amazing. I'd love to see that. But until then, it's just an endless amount of who said what and mystery. But here is something Dr. Paul Thigpen said that Padre Pio published, or it said to a journalist. Let's listen.
And so this is Padre Pio.
Just read right into the
This document is officially published by the Capuchin Order.
Okay.
Question, Father Pio, some claim that there are creatures of God on other planets, too. Answer, what else? Do you think they don't exist and that God's omnipotence, I can just hear him saying that, God's omnipotence is limited to this small planet Earth? What else? Do you think there are no other beings who love the Lord? Second question, Father, I throw a reply. I think the Earth is nothing compared to other planets and stars. Pio replies, exactly, yes. And we Earthlings are nothing too. Listen to this. The Lord certainly did not limit his glory to this small Earth. And this last one is a zinger. On other planets, other beings exist who did not sin and fall as we did.
Padre Pio said
yes.
That? Wild.
That was on Pints with Aquinas with Matt Fradd and Dr. Paul Thigpen. Again, we're going to link to everything in the show notes at thestationofthecross.com/ACT. Producer Jake will publish those right after the show goes off the air. But so Padre Pio, who's my patron saint, by the way, I carry his third class relic in my wallet every single day for my life. That's how close I am to Padre Pio, somebody I've talked about often. So he seems to suggest that there's alien life out there. In fact, I would argue, in fact, there is alien life out there. We call them angels. They're intelligent beings that are not human, and they exist. And the fallen ones love to manipulate mankind. They love to manipulate us to the point where we would make bad decisions, that we would reject God, commit mortal sins, die in that sin, and spend eternity in hell being punished for our choices, the sad choices that we would make. They would manipulate us on a personal level, and they would manipulate us on a societal level as well. At every level of humankind, we are going to find demons doing their best to manipulate and to persuade us to reject God. So imagine how many souls might reject God if it were to be true, if it were to be found out that in fact there are aliens on another planet. I mean, how many atheist apologists have tried to make the argument that life forms, life started here millions of years ago when aliens deposited it from other planets. And they all just, evolved. Well, then where did those life forms come from? Where was the origin? What's the stepping off point? If it came from a different planet, what was the origin there? You can't ignore the question. Life was not, and then it was. That moment had to have a cause. It had to have a creator. It had to have some greater being, something greater than itself, pushing it towards existence. You can't escape it, whether it's on this planet, that planet, or the other planet. Nonetheless, they use these arguments, they use these things to try to persuade humans to reject God. We should be careful of that form of alien intelligence. We should be very careful because it would persuade us in a way that would have eternal consequences. Here's what one of the members concluded as a result of their investigation.
As a corollary, to date, in the refereed scientific literature, there is no conclusive evidence suggesting an extraterrestrial origin for UAP.
Did you catch that? That was a member of the panel. That was a member of the panel who concluded, and her name was, I think her name was Nadia Drake, UAP panelist, and she concluded that, in fact, they have no evidence. But here's what the philosopher Brad Pitt had to say.
Strange and distant worlds in greater detail than ever before. Beautiful, magnificent, full of awe and wonder.
This is from Ad Astra.
Beneath their sublime surface,
a Hollywood film.
There was nothing.
There was nothing.
Love.
Have you seen Ad Astra?
Light or dark.
They explore the universe and they are depressed to find nothing there. Every planet we have discovered so far, every planet within reach of us, with light or any other means, nothing. There is no life there. Could it be beyond? Who am I to know? I don't know. I trust God no matter what happens. Hey, we'll be right back. More breaking news and stories, and the SSPX is coming up next. Share us with a friend.
Did you know there's still time to support our 2023 Spring Appeal? The theme of this appeal is, Lord, hear our prayers. By donating at the benefactor level with a gift of $840 or $70 per month, you'll receive the book by Pope Benedict XVI entitled A School of Prayer. The Saints Show Us How to Pray. You'll also receive a corded wood rosary, a book of Catholic prayers, and 2 talks by email presented by Joe McLean on bringing loved ones back to the faith. To donate, call 1-877-711-8500. Go to thestationofthecross.com, use the donation page of your iCatholic Radio app, or return the envelope from our recent Spring Appeal mailing. That's 1-877-711-8500 or thestationofthecross.com. May God richly bless you for your generosity.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McLean, and here are your headline news. The Pillar reports Kansas City Archbishop clarifies wine validity norms. The Archbishop of Kansas City has warned priests that they could be offering Mass with invalid matter and that they should ensure their altar wine is both free from additives and especially vented for sacramental use. Archbishop Joseph Naumann noted in a May 31st letter obtained by the Pillar, quote, "It has recently been reported by 2 priests having served in 3 different parishes that upon their appointment to these parishes, they soon discovered the long-term use of wines that were in fact invalid matter for the confection of the Holy Eucharist," close quote. As a result, he wrote, in those parishes, quote, "For any number of years, all masses were invalid, and therefore the intentions for which those masses were offered were not satisfied, including the obligation pastors have to offer Mass for the people. This is a gravely serious situation for which we must now petition the Holy See for guidance on restorative matters," close quote. Canon and liturgical law stipulate that wine produced only from grapes can be used for the Eucharistic sacrifice. Whew. Could you imagine how many people have attended those masses? What an outrage. CNA reports Cardinal Zuppi arrives in Ukraine to begin work as Vatican peace envoy. The Vatican announces June 5 the Cardinal Matteo Zuppi will spend 2 days in the Ukraine capital to listen in depth to the Ukrainian authorities about possible ways to achieve a just peace and support humanitarian gestures that may help ease tensions. During the June 5-6 visit, Zuppi is expected to meet with Ukrainian Minister of Foreign Affairs Dmytro Kulybas and Major Archbishop Sviatoslav Shevchuk and possibly President Volodymyr Zelensky, although the Vatican did not release any details about the Cardinal's schedule. Vatican Secretary of State Cardinal Pietro Parolin told journalists, quote, "This mission is not for the immediate purpose of mediation, but rather to create the climate and help it move toward a peaceful solution." Catholic Vote reports liberal bishop breaks ranks on Eucharist. Bishop John Stowe of the Diocese of Lexington, Kentucky, raised eyebrows this week when he criticized his fellow American bishops in part for their effort to increase their flock's devotion to the Holy Eucharist. Quote, "It does not strike me as coincidental that much of the Eucharistic revival focuses on Eucharistic adoration, passive in nature, and so offers an easy alternative to the active engagement of walking together synodally," close quote, he wrote. You smell that? Smells kind of weird, doesn't it? Yeah, I thought so too. And those are your headline news. A special shout out to our iCatholic Radio 300 Club. Praise be to God. Good morning to you. We love having the iCatholic Radio team on board. Thanks for listening on iCatholic Radio. It's a fantastic way to get Catholic Radio 24/7, clear as crystal, wherever you are on planet Earth. You can watch the live video feed there of this show. You can get the podcast of all of our programs there and so much more. Download it in your iOS or Android app store today. iCatholic Radio. Share it with a friend too. We would be very grateful to you. Joining us now, though, is Matt Gaspers. He is the editor of Catholic Family News. Good morning to you, Matt Gaspers.
Hi, Joe. Good to be with you this morning.
Praise be to God. We appreciate your time today. Thank you for being on. I saw your article last week, Archdiocese of Kansas City comments on SSPX in light of recent Immaculata Church consecration. SSPX has been in the news quite a bit lately. There was the Bishop Strickland issue on Twitter. Maybe we can get into a little bit of that as well. But why don't we start with the actual church that was consecrated? This is a massive building, very beautifully designed and very elegant in its ornament and everything else. Tell us about this. What is the history? What is the background of this particular church?
Right. So I think it might be the largest Catholic church in the state of Kansas now. I do know that it is the largest SSPX built church anywhere in the world. I believe it stands about 12 stories tall and seats around 1,500 people, and it's a gorgeous church. I was not able to be there for the consecration ceremony, which took place on May 3rd, but I've seen the video footage. It's available. I have it linked in my article. But essentially, this is a project really decades in the making. When the SSPX originally bought the property of an old Jesuit-run college in St. Mary's, Kansas, there was a beautiful church that was, I think, originally built in 1909 called the Immaculata, hence the name of the new church. But tragically, very shortly after they purchased that land, I think in 1978, there was a fire. There was some kind of an electrical short. The church caught fire and was very badly damaged, basically beyond restoration. It would be more efficient just to demolish the old building and build a new one, which is what they decided to do. So, they've been fundraising for this new project for decades, literally, and now this year they finally finished construction and were able to consecrate the building.
Wow. I'm looking at a video clip that's embedded into your article, which is CatholicFamilyNews.com, by the way. And we're going to be linking to this article in our show notes at thestationofthecross.com/ACT. But the building is massive. Of course, I'm always a sucker for big, beautiful Catholic churches. Even when I was a Protestant, there was something about a big, beautiful Catholic church. I remember visiting, in Bavaria and Austria, let alone in Italy, and you see these spaces and your mind is blown. Even as a non-Catholic, my mind was blown. And so I think that's the power of beautiful traditional Catholic architecture. So I'm a sucker for a great cathedral, a basilica. I mean, the National Basilica in Washington, D.C., its grandeur, its epicness, it just elevates the mind, the heart, and the soul towards the heaven. That is the purpose. But so few of our churches are built this way today, Matt, don't you think? So I think this stands in clear contrast to that.
It certainly does. It's a shame that there's been so much of what's colloquially called a wreckivation of Catholic churches over the past several decades, but I think that's a very fitting term because so many of them truly have been wrecked. They've had their beautiful, majestic high altars torn out and replaced with a little table. much more reminiscent of a Protestant community rather than a Catholic church. So it's great to see, this new Immaculata church cost in the neighborhood of $42 million. And my understanding is that about 99% of that was paid off in advance. So they have very little, remaining to pay off. That's really impressive. Actually, Bishop Bernard Ferlet, who is one of the 4 bishops consecrated illicitly in 1988 by Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre for the society, jokingly commented during his sermon that, an official from Rome one time asked him, Pope Francis asked me, this official said, where does the society get all its money? And Bishop Fillet said, it's not, I'm paraphrasing a bit, it's not the result of a few, very rich, generous benefactors, but it's really from Catholic faithful who have the faith, who are giving of the little of their substance for the common good of the whole. So it was a very good explanation, I think.
Yeah, wasn't the Vatican asking questions about this just last week? Where did they get the money to build this? And, because money's tight at the Vatican these days. They're dependent upon the German church to provide much of it. And we're dealing with the German synodality as a result of that financial relationship. So I think it surprises many that the faithful would support this. And yet that is a time-honored tradition. A great example that I have given many times is about the cathedral in New Hampshire, Manchester, New Hampshire. They have renovated it from its recavation, it post Vatican II watering down. I brought into the church there. I was married there. And when I was there, it was green carpet. It was bland. It was devoid of iconography and grandeur and beauty. Well, to the bishop's credit in New Hampshire, it is splendid. It is beautiful. It is glorious now. They brought back the high altar. It is incredible. It is epic. It is inspirational. And he is trying to do that across his diocese in a difficult situation nonetheless. So it's possible to have beauty. Now, let's maybe get into the weeds a little bit here about the SSPX in specificity. I myself am not SSPX. I've been to the chapel once about 15 years ago for a funeral. I find myself sympathetic, but I have reservations about the SSPX. But in your article, you point out that the Archdiocese comments on the relationship of the SSPX in relation to the church. What did they say?
Yeah, so I decided to reach out to the Archdiocese for comments. I thought it was interesting that, after doing a bit of searching on their website, I wasn't really able to find any kind of a comment about the construction or the consecration of the Immaculata, even though it resides kind of on the western edge of the Archdiocese of Kansas City. So I decided, I want to reach out to the Archdiocese and see if they have any thoughts about this new church in their territory and about the society in general. So I emailed the Archdiocese Office of Media Relations and asked a few specific questions. These are all listed in my article. So first of all, does Archbishop Joseph Naumann, the Archbishop of Kansas City, consider the members of the SSPX to be schismatic? If yes, on what grounds? And just to be clear, the only actual members of the Society of St. Pius X are the clerics themselves. There are no lay members of the society, just to be clear about that. It's only the priests and the 4 bishops and any of the lesser clergy, like in minor orders and seminarians who have been tonsured and such. So that was the first question. Does the Archbishop consider them schismatic? Number 2, does Archbishop Naumann hold that Catholics may fulfill their Sunday and Holy Day obligation by attending a Mass offered by an SSPX priest? If no, on what grounds? And then finally, does Archbishop Naumann ever grant faculties to SSPX priests to witness Catholic marriages in accord with the Pontifical Commission Ecclesia Dei's 2017 letter? So those were my questions to just kind of get a sense of where the Archdiocese stands on the SSPX.
And what was their responses?
Yes, so here was a couple weeks of, a little bit of lag time. I'd have some cordial correspondence with the media relations staff member, and then finally got some answers from the Archdiocese. And I was told I wasn't the person who responded, who composed these answers was not identified, but I was told that it was, quote, an authoritative representative of the Archbishop.
Wow.
So here's what they said. While regrettably the Church, meaning the Catholic Church, and the SSPX are not currently in full communion, the Archdiocese does not consider the SSPX to be schismatic. Going on, it says, while canonically one may fulfill one's obligation to participate at Holy Mass on Sundays and holy days of obligation by attending an SSPX Mass, the Masses are not licitly offered by priests possessing the grant of priestly faculties from the Archdiocese. Therefore, participation at SSPX Masses to satisfy one's Sunday obligation is discouraged. Now, discouraged doesn't mean not allowed or not possible. It simply is discouraged. They do say you can fulfill your obligation by attending an SSPX Mass. And then finally, the answer says the Archdiocese does, in support of Pope Francis's pastoral outlook as expressed in the 2017 letter, grant SSPX priests the faculty to witness marriages when the priests requested. The Archdiocese understands that at this time, the SSPX priests in St. Mary's request faculties to witness all marriages at the Immaculata, end quote.
As a layperson who, my opinion and a nickel will get you just about nothing anymore. But nonetheless, I'm not an SSPX apologist. As I said, I'm sympathetic to their cause, but I have reservations about the issue. But what gets me about it is, it seems like it's left up to us and every individual bishop to make statements about these things versus clarity that comes out of the Holy See that solves the issue. Because some bishops will still say, no, they're still a schismatic. And others say, no, they're fine. Like this Archdiocese seems to indicate. Or as I've interviewed Bishop Athanasius Schneider on a number of occasions has indicated, or as Bishop Strickland has recently indicated, it seems like we're left with greater and more confusion, never-ending confusion being the order of the day. And we're up against a hard radio break here. Matt Gaspers is our guest. Catholic Family News, CatholicFamilyNews.com is his website. We're having a conversation about this beautiful church that was consecrated with the SSPX in Kansas, and what it all means, why the Archdiocese would say these things and the implications of it. And we're going to talk more about that right after this break. So don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back. But do us a favor, share us with a friend. We would be super grateful to you. We'll be right back. Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McLean. So good to be on with you. Praise be to God. Coming up at the top of the hour, we're going to say goodbye to our radio audience, but we're going to stay on for the Insider Crew conversation, what we call the after show, where you get to drive that conversation with your commentary. We'll interact directly with you. We can talk about whatever's on your mind. We can talk about aliens. Do you believe in aliens? We'll have that conversation. Or we can talk about the SSPX. All up to you, and you get to drive it. Just go to the stationofthecross.com/ACT. You'll see the live video feed there. The link's right underneath it of where you can go to comment on. But the best place is on our private Telegram group, which you can only access by joining our insider list. Also the link on the website. Go to thestationofthecross.com/ACT. Matt Gaspers is our guest. He is the editor at Catholic Family News. CatholicFamilyNews.com is the website. We'll link to that as well in the show notes today. And very interestingly, he reached out to the Archdiocese of Kansas City to ask about their take on this brand new, beautiful church that was consecrated with the SSPX. I guess technically it's considered a chapel. And they said some very interesting things in response. Matt, welcome back to the show. Just before the break, you told us what they said about the relationship between the SSPX and the church. Many believe that the SSPX is in schism. Many believe that it is not. I find it fascinating that the Archdiocese has officially said to you that their position is it is not. There was a sort of a fallout of sorts on Twitter last week, 2 weeks ago now, maybe, with Bishop Strickland who made some off-the-cuff comments about the SSPX being in schism, but then reversed his course after having a conversation with Bishop Schneider on it. I've personally interviewed Bishop Schneider about that subject in the past. He has said that they are not in schism, and yet people like Cardinal Burke remain that they are in schism. So I'd like you to get to your comment on that. It seems like it's left up to whomever, whether they're bishops or lay folk and everybody in between, to make their own determinations here.
Yeah, it does certainly seem like that at some point. It would be nice just for one definitive statement from the Holy See. But in a certain sense, you mentioned Bishop Athanasius Schneider. I'm a big fan of his as well. I've gotten to meet him a couple of times in person. And, his is more than just maybe like a private opinion, because he was actually sent in 2015 as what's called an apostolic visitator, kind of an official envoy from the Vatican, the Holy See, to formally, officially visit the seminaries of the Society of St. Pius X and report back to Rome about his findings regarding the state of things, his analysis of what they're doing. And essentially he said, quote, "There are no weighty reasons in order to deny the clergy and faithful of the SSPX the official canonical recognition." He said that in 2015. I'm quoting from an article about that subject from Rorate Caeli. And he's also said in his book-length interview, which he did with Diane Montagna, and I quote this in my article, that, quote, "The SSPX are already in communion with the Church since they recognize the current Pope, mention him in the canon of the Mass, pray for him publicly, and pray for the local diocesan bishop. In my opinion," he continues, "the SSPX should be recognized, in other words, given canonical status, which is what they currently lack. And if they were, it would be a true spiritual and pastoral help to the entire Church," says Bishop Schneider in Christus Vincit, "to strengthen doctrine and tradition in the Church." So that's kind of why I chose to reach out to the Archdiocese, just to see where they stand on the issue, because at least one of the Pope's official representatives inquiring into this society has a very positive take on them, and that is Bishop Athanasius Schneider.
So again, we're left with confusion, because I agree. I think his opinion does have weight because he was the guy sent. I agree with that. But nonetheless, it's hard to ignore some of the voices that say quite the opposite. So let me ask you this. Why do they remain in a canonically irregular situation, which adds to this confusion? Recently, we saw that I think he was a archbishop maybe, who made those comments. He's now living with the SSPX in retirement, but he made the comments that Pope Francis told him personally that the SSPX is not in schism. I've heard many times that Pope Francis has met with the leaders of the SSPX, takes them an audience. Mm-hmm. So why not just clarify the whole mess? Why not just solve this thing and we can all just move along?
I would certainly be in favor of that as well. Yes, you're talking about Bishop Wander, I think is how you say his name. I think he's retired Swiss somewhere in Europe, who lives with the society and recently made those comments. But, the kind of the heart of the matter, as your listeners may be familiar, Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre, who founded the society in 1970, did so because he was concerned about the trajectory of the Church following the Second Vatican Council, the new ways of doing things, and specifically priestly formation, which is what his concern was about. He had taken an early retirement, but he had seminarians coming to him saying, we're worried about going to such and such seminary because of the new ways of doing things, and some of the things we're seeing and hearing there are very concerning to us. We want good Orthodox formation. And so finally he basically gave in to their clamoring and decided to start his own seminary with the approval of a local bishop in Switzerland. But that's kind of been the sticking point for them, is he has deep concerns about the new Mass, the Novus Ordo Missae, as well as certain novel, I don't even know if you can call them teachings per se. I guess they are teachings in a certain sense, but almost like policy positions or prudential matters in the documents of Vatican II. which, not just to bring up Bishop Schneider again, he shares many of the concerns of the society on these matters, and he has expressed them publicly. He's published on them, and yet he is, in full communion, and yet the society expresses those same concerns, those same positions, and somehow they're not in full communion according to the authorities. So it's very confusing, very confusing.
And then, of course, the split faculties. They obtain faculties, at least when they request them from their dioceses, from the local ordinaries for marrying. From what I understand, they don't always ask, right, but maybe most do. Praise be to God. Of course, they have faculties for hearing confession and whatnot, and clearly, as the Archbishop in Kansas has allowed his communications office to communicate to you, they certainly believe that lay faithful are fulfilling their Sunday obligation by going to them. So it does seem very odd that they remain in this canonical irregular situation without rectifying. We're going to run out of time here very quickly, but there's rumors that there are going to be more ordinations. Do you think the Vatican will approve additional bishops being ordained in the SSPX?
Well, actually, just yesterday, the Society of St. Pius X released an official statement on that matter, some commentary by one of the high-ranking members of the society, a Father Glees. I think I'm pronouncing that name correctly. He's one of their seminary professors in the original seminary in Écône, Father Jean-Michel Glees, professor of apologetics, ecclesiology, and theology. And he has essentially said that it is a tall tale. He says maybe you read it on social media that coming up the society, Bishop Vitus Honder, the retired bishop who's living in one of their houses, assisted by one of Bishop de la Galarreta and Bishop Fillet, will confer episcopal consecration on 3 priests, among whom are the current Superior General, Father David Pagliarani. But he basically said this is fake news, so don't give it any credence.
And that's official from the SSPX. There you go, folks.
Correct.
Wrapping up the rumors. Hey, Matt Gaspers, I really appreciate your time today. I think it's great conversation and important to have, and clarity is charity. So let's pray that the Holy See will provide clarity for the community that has been going to the SSPX. I think that would be good. Catholic Family News, CatholicFamilyNews.com is their website. We're going to link to this particular article with the headline says Archdiocese of Kansas City comments on SSPX in light of recent Immaculata Church consecration. But that'll be over at thestationlacrosse.com/ACT in our show notes. Matt Gaspers, God bless you. God love you. We'd love to have you back sometime.
Thanks, Joe. God bless.
All right, coming up is the after show. We'd love to have you there. Until then, God love you.